Darren again, hope you're well. Keeping it loose again today and looking at 10 songs with dual, or in some cases, multiple personalities. Yeah, today I'm talking about songs which exist in multiple versions, either as re-recordings, reinterpretations, or mixes, which have enough of a difference in feel or emphasis that you can categorically say, I prefer this one to this one. I'm not about to open up the whole remix can of worms, as that very often involves wholesale strip downs or rebuilds to satisfy an entirely different market or an audience, and this often being carried out by third parties with little or no input from the original artists themselves. So none of those extended 80s, 90s dance for 12-inch mixes here, as fun as some of those can be, and no session or live cuts either. Yeah, I'm only really looking at different studio takes, recordings or mixes of the same song. And yeah, I will tell you which version I think is the better one. So let's go. And first up at number 1, I've got REM and Radio Free Europe. This is the classic debut single from 1981, originally released on the tiny Hib Tone label, but re-recorded for inclusion as the opening track on the band's 1983 debut album Murmur on IRS. If you missed that original single, it has been widely compiled and reissued in several forms, most notably, I guess, on the band's eponymous compilation album, which was a parting release when the band moved from IRS to Warner's in 1988. And for me, the Hibtone version is the clear winner. It's a faster tempo than the Murmur take. It's just livelier, brighter, better all round, really. Catching the band with that kind of almost power pop new wave sound of their very earliest days. The album re-recording certainly sits better, sonically speaking, on Murmur itself. It's got the same darker, swampy kind of murky atmosphere, and it's a little slower. But I think if you were to take the track in isolation, yeah, the Hibtone one wins for me every time. Second up, cheating a bit, I've got the Pixies and Gigantic and or Vamos. Yeah, I'm doing 2 tracks in one here, a bit of a cheat, but I can't really separate them as they're both here for essentially the same reason, but under slightly different circumstances. Yeah, namely that the versions of each song from the Surfer Rosa album are the best takes, I think, at least to my ears. Yeah, Vamos is a re-recording of the track that originally featured on the band's debut mini album, Come On Pilgrim, and Gigantic, yeah, that was subsequently remixed and re-recorded by Gil Norton for release as a single, alongside River Euphrates on its B-side. And for me, the Surfer Rosa LP versions, they just win out here. Vamos is longer, with an extended kind of middle freak-out section, which takes it over the 4-minute mark. And between, Joey's scuzzy, fractured guitar mangling and the rabid schizophrenia of Francis' vocal cozying up to Kim Deal's backing coos, I think it's better in just about every way. It's closer with Gigantic, I think. It's just a little cleaner, a little clearer on the single than on the album. Yeah, everything feels a little more separated and defined, which is all well and good, but it has less of a kind of a unified band feel to me. It also has a few superfluous backing vocals dusted on top, which I don't think add anything of any real consequence. The dynamics of that Albini Surfer Rosa recording, they feel kind of roomy and more natural, a bit less sculpted, a bit bigger sounding. I think there's much less in this one in terms of a difference, much finer margins, but I still prefer the album version. At 3, I've got New Order and Temptation, and this comes from that period where it all started coming together for New Order, I think. The songs and the EPs released between The Movement and the Power, Corruption and Lies albums are just glorious and a perfect document of a band wrestling with the technology until it all kind of finally gelled for them. I find this a tricky one because my first encounter with Temptation was via the Substance compilation from 1987, where they actually re-recorded Temptation from scratch, this version being later dubbed Temptation 87. As a consequence, when I think of Temptation, I tend to default to that 1987 recording, which was also the one that was featured on the Trainspotting movie soundtrack. I don't know, it's such a great song, and New Order never really did, polish at this point, so I find it much tougher to call. The original 7-inch and 12-inch versions are magical in their own way too, really. The kind of awkward, rubbery thwack of the snare, the kind of slightly stiffer, more tentative sounding vocal from Barney, and the extended run that those kind of chattery sequences get, particularly in the 12-inch version. You can't really go wrong with Temptations. I will leave this one completely open. I should point out there is even another version, re-recorded in 1998. A bit slicker again, a bit tighter. I don't think it adds anything, but you may think otherwise. And rewinding just a few years before, I've got Joy Division and She's Lost Control. And as much as Joy Division's debut album, Unknown Pleasures, is a massive high watermark in recording terms, and certainly in post-punk terms, I prefer the re-recorded 12-inch version to the album version. Martin Hannett produced both versions, with the 12-inch one being recorded in the same very short session in March of 1980. That's just before the Closer sessions. Yet this same session yielding Love Will Tear Us Apart. And as well as the sonic upgrades, the drums, that they snap harder, the bass is pushed forward in the mix, those really thick synths. There's also an extra lyric, an extra section added on here near the end where Curtis sings, "I could live a little better with the myths and the lies. When the darkness broke in, I just broke down and cried." Yeah, I absolutely love this version. It's more trancey, it's more mechanical, it's more disturbing. It's huge sounding. It's purely designed to be heard in a dingy kind of goth club. And that extra verse, the coda, just lifts the song to an entirely new level. Yeah, I think this is how you re-record a classic, and you just make it better. But staying on the kind of darker side, musically speaking, but jumping forward to the 90s, I've got The God Machine and The Desert Song. And whilst the version from their debut album, that's 1992's Scenes from the Second Story, is good, I will take the original EP version from earlier the same year every day of the week. Yeah, weighing in at 7.5 minutes, that's half as long again as the album version. I think it crushes the album version. Yeah, a much longer intro build-up with heavily layered guitars adding much more heft and atmosphere. I'll sum this up with a Hollywood-style 2-word pitch, and that's shoegaze swans. Yeah, it's huge, it's portentous, it's a brilliant song. The album version is absolutely fine, but it feels kind of like, to me, a kind of faded second-generation photocopy of the original. Plus, and this is wandering off topic a bit here, the other 3 tracks on this EP are up there with some of the band's very best. So it's another reason, if you need one, to seek out this version. 6 on the list, I've got Guided by Voices and My Valuable Hunting Knife. Yeah, going from, bigger equals better to worse equals better. This one's an utterly emotional response because objectively, it's recorded poorly. It's amateurishly rendered. It's shoddy by almost anybody's standards, but the album version just has something. Yeah, Guided by Voices re-recorded this song from maybe their best album, 1995's Alien Lanes, for release on the Tiger Bomb EP later in the same year. It is included on Under the Bushes, Under the Stars if you pick up a CD of that. The album version's faster and has more energy, I think, than the Pro Studio take can muster. I'm not anti-GBV, doing the slicker, the better produced thing. I've waxed lyrically about both of their recent albums, their latest albums this year. They've just dropped a 3rd one. But this song in this setting, I think it just works. Whilst the slicker version on the Tiger Bomb EP, it just feels like it's trying a little too hard. Yeah, sometimes I think less just is more. 7, I've got The Jesus Lizard and Uncommonly Good. So I talked about the band's Shot album a few videos back. There'll be a link somewhere right above me. And I think one of the more divisive, more kind of curious tracks on Shot is Pervertedly Slow, an oozing, turgid, willfully ugly album closer. It's kind of a real plodding downer on which to end what is actually a rather good album. Help is at hand because the band recorded an alternate take of the track at a much more appropriate tempo. They renamed it Uncommonly Good, and they donated it to the charity compilation, the Lounge Acts Defense and Relocation Compact Disc, released in 1996, the same year as Shot. And the result is a low-key Jesus Lizard classic to me that doesn't sound like the band on Mogadon. You can also pick this one up on their Bang Rarities Singles Oddities compilation too, so there's absolutely no reason to miss out on what I think is the definitive full speed version of this song. And at 8 on the list, I've got the Minutemen with Little Man with a Gun in His Hand. Yeah, this is an interesting, notable song in the Minutemen discography, being the first song they recorded which passed the 3-minute mark. It was originally recorded for their amazing 1983 EP, Buzz or Howl, Under the Influence of Heat, but it was re-recorded for inclusion on the original vinyl pressing of the landmark double Nickels on the Dime double album from the following year. It's on the side Chaff, to be exact. But do beware, many CD reissues over the years have either dropped or substituted several tracks due to space considerations, and as of now, today, that's 2023, there is still no CD reissue of Double Nickels with a complete track list. That means that Little Man with a Gun in His Hand has been excluded from every single CD reissue of the album, which is a shame. Anyway, this is another one of those you takes your pick decisions here. The Buzz or Howl version is a little livelier, looser, more raucous, less produced. It's Spot at the desk, so it's got that live kind of raw feel. The Double Nickels version sounds a little fuller and a little clearer and cleaner. The drums, I think, on this are noticeably better recorded. Yeah, but, enjoy either version, really. It's a stone cold kind of desert island Minutemen pick for me. We're revisiting Manchester now for the last 2 entries on this list with at number 9. I've got the Inspiral Carpets and I Want You. Compilation here of their singles. It's purely here because, well, one, I'm still working on part 2 of my fall primer. I haven't given up on it. And that this song happens to feature a guest vocal from Marky Smith in its single incarnation. But 2, I'd completely blanked the fact that they'd actually recorded it for their 1994 Devil Hopping album, but without Marky Smith. Yeah, and this fact cropped up whilst I was listening to one of the Hanley Brothers' Oh Brother podcasts, where Clint Boone of the Inspirals, who was recounting his experience of recording with Marky Smith. Yes, the single version is the one you want, with Mark on board. It's brilliant. That's all you need to know, really. Sonically, I think maybe it's also a bit of a signpost towards the last 10 years or so of the Falls output. It's got a raw, kind of garagey, psychedelic tinged kind of rock feel to it. And finally, a rare, very rare foray into dance or electronic music for me on one of these videos. So excuse me if my genre definitions get a bit squiffy, because this really ain't my area. Anyway, I've always had a soft spot for this track. So to close, at number 10, I've got 808 State and Pacific State. Yeah, cast your mind back, 1989, indie dance, Manchester, acid house, all that stuff. Anything went really, and it would be quite unusual for any self-respecting UK indie kid to not have at least a basic grounding, a working knowledge in some of the club sounds of that day. And this track in particular was a proper hit, working its way from the clubs via John Peel all the way to Top of the Pops. And 808 State ultimately got picked up by ZTT Records for that chart appearance, but the original version from the Quadra State mini LP on Creed Records is the one that I would recommend. It's heavily Detroit-influenced house music, acid house, Balearic house, bordering on kind of chill-out, ambient territory, I guess you'd say. It's got that sax line, it's got that bird sample, the loom sample, the beats. It's widely considered, an all-time ambient kind of club classic. Yeah, I believe it was the mix called Pacific 707 was the one that actually charted, but for me, that extended mix, the original mix on Quadra State, is I think the best. And just of interest, while I'm talking about Quadra State, this release, Quadra State, gets the last mention for Gerald Simpson on the sleeve as a co-writer of Pacific State. Gerald Simpson, of course, that's a guy called Gerald who formed 808 State alongside Graham Massey and Martin Price in 1987. He went fully solo just prior to the release of Quadra State, but had already, cemented his place by this time in acid house folklore history with that huge, huge club hit of his Voodoo Ray in 1988. And that is my dance music quota filled for the year. Any more of that, and I will really just end up embarrassing myself. And that's it for the list. quite a nerdy list. I don't know, you tell me. Some of these tracks differ, in very minor ways. Others are kind of, there's clearly, a re-recording difference in the versions. And I'm sure there are also plenty of great candidates for a list like this that I've missed, which I guess you can fill me in on in the comments section below. As ever, thanks if you've got this far into the video for watching this far. It's very, very much appreciated. Give me a like if you've got the time, and yeah, subscribe if you haven't already done so. And that's it for today. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Yeah, you take care, and bye for now.